Hello everyone, welcome back to another painting tutorial. The voiceover is back this time. I skipped it in the few last videos because I was busy with other things, but I realized it really helps make the tutorial easier to follow. Last time it was just my painting process with even no text or tips in the subtitles, so today I'll be sharing a bit more about the process behind my painting. First, I'm starting with a quick sketch, just a few loose lines to guide the painting. For the sky color, I'm mixing Prussian blue with a bit of mid yellow to get a greenish tone, mostly because I feel like going for this color. If you prefer a bluer or more reddish tone, that's totally fine too. As always, be creative with your color choices. It doesn't have to match mine exactly. That's kind of my go-to mindset when painting most of the times. If you focus too much on copying a reference perfectly, you might get stressed out when the colors don't match, and that can take the fun out of it. Painting is supposed to be relaxing and enjoyable, so don't worry if your colors turn out differently. For the clouds, I'm mixing more passion blue with a bit of black to create a darker shade, since the clouds on the left side are slightly darker. Then I gradually build the colors lighter as I move toward the right. I just wanna tell you, actually, I'm using Gouache jelly paints. You know, the ones that come in those little containers inside the box. I used to use those a lot, but they kept growing mold. Every time they dried, I had to add water, mix it again, and scrub the mold out, which was such a hassle. So I ended up letting them dry out completely, and now I use them more like dry gouache or even watercolor. You know, when it's dry, it works kind of like watercolor anyway, so sometimes I'll pull it out for looser watercolor style paintings. These days, though, I switched to gouache, but in, you know, that refill bags, the gouache refill pouches. So I just keep it in the bags. I don't put it inside of the container anymore. So maybe, hopefully, that would take the mold problem away. For the clouds on the right side, I mixed a tiny bit of yellow into the blue to give it a subtle greenish tint. The clouds, they aren't pure white yet, so we're just gonna keep that for the highlights. They have that slight greenish tone, so this mix creates that effect. Now I'm just mixing some white with the color I used earlier for the clouds and kind of like add highlights to certain parts in the clouds. Next, I'm painting the distant trees, and for that I'm using black mixed with just a touch of green, so it's not a straight black. For the distant grass also, I'm mixing green with a bit of black as well. To finish, I add a subtle highlight on top of the distant trees using a green and black mix. Still, I'm keeping it muted so it doesn't pop too much. For the ocean, I want the color to lean more green instead of matching the blue of the sky. So I'm mixing Prussian blue with a bit of yellow green, and some white until I get a nice greenish tone. I loosely apply that as the base color for the ocean. No need to be too detailed yet since we'll add more layers later. On the left side of the ocean, I mix in a little more Prussian blue with yellow-green to create a darker shade. As the water gets closer to the foreground, I add more white to lighten it and start hinting at some subtle details. I'm already loving how this color is turning out. It has such a nice depth. Next, I mix white with mid-yellow and brush a bit of it near the foreground where the sun shows through the shallow water. To create the sun color itself, I mix more yellow and white with just a touch of red, then add more white to capture that shiny sunlit reflection. I use a few different mixes of white and sun tones so it's not just one flat color. And I paint a bit of the distant sand as well, adding small details to give it more texture. Now I'm using straight white, thinned with a little water to make it easier to apply. With this mix, I'm adding the effect of waves and sunlight reflection on the water. I'm just painting small careful lines across the surface to create that shimmering reflection. This part really makes the painting pop. Honestly, you could just stop here and it would already look amazing. I'm not a big on super detailed painting because it stresses me out, so I love how it looks even at this stage, but I decided to add a bit more depth anyway. I'm mixing a tiny bit of red and yellow with white to create a slightly darker sand color. then dabbing it randomly around the center area to suggest soft shadows. This also makes the sunlit reflection stand out even more, which I love. Next, I switch to my black mixture and paint a few small rocks here and there. While the rocks dry, I go back to my Prussian blue with a touch of yellow-green to deepen the shadows on the left side of the ocean. That area sits under a cloud, so it's naturally darker. I also scatter a few of these shadow tones in random spots across the water, following where the reference shows more contrast. But the left side is definitely needs to stay the darkest. Then I return to the distant trees to add a final highlight on top using yellow-green mixed with a little black. I still want it muted so it doesn't get too vibrant. I continue painting the distant grass the same way. Once the rocks are dry, I add small highlights using a random mix of white, yellow, and a bit of green to get a natural rock color. I lightly brush it on top of each rock, making sure to leave the shadows underneath so they keep their shape. Next, I'm mixing a bit of yellow-green with a touch of black to add highlights to this little bush area, and I'm deepening the shadows under the distant trees because they still don't feel dark enough. And that's it, that's the painting for today. I love the details aren't too overwhelming. Honestly, that's my usual style now. I used to practice painting with a lot of fine detail. I still do, but it always felt a bit too much. These days, I'm happier with looser style like this as long as the shadows and highlights are right. I love the result. The print of this painting will be available in the description. I'm so thankful if you choose to support me by purchasing one of my prints. There are already lots of my paintings on the website. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon, inshallah. Bye bye.